Hello, welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions.
I'm cheering for myself.
I would cheer for you too. We deal with a lot of startups here, and obviously startups are always asking for help with customers, funding and talent. We're going to address number one today. We're going to focus on customers with a very special guest, Mari Lee, who, if I can, please, a warm welcome for Mari Lee.
Come on, I need a woo!
And if I can, could I ask you to give a little bit of background on yourself so that people know who they're going to be hearing from about customers today?
Excellent. So thank you everyone for making the time. I appreciate it. We've got an exciting session today. A bit about me. My name's Mari Lee. I'm the CMO of B2C product marketing agency. And essentially, our agency, we have about 30 years of collective experience that we bring as a consultant as well as a mentor to your startups. And what we do is I've launched over like 100 products over the course of my 30 years experience. I've done it for companies of all sizes and different verticals. So, you know, Twitter is an example, pre-Ellen. Also OpenTable, Brother. My last three companies were at fintechs. So I worked at N26, which is one of the most valuable fintechs in Europe, and I helped them enter the US market. I worked at Moneyline. So that was a fintech that I helped send public in 2021. And then most recently I was the CMO at Greenwood. It was a fintech targeting the African American community, and they were most recently noted by Forbes as one of the top 7 or 8 brands to look out for in 2022. So I bring a range of experience, and I'm really excited to be here to help the community, both as a mentor and just I'm here to talk to you. So I want to learn more about you and how I can help.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. That's an incredible background. We're very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. I think it'd be helpful for all the mentoring that you do to get across some of the common things that you do tell people, I think. So when you talk about customers, what are the kind of areas that you find yourself talking to people about most often?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably 3 things, and they're all tied to customers, right? So the first thing is really around solving the right problems. And when you think about solving the right problems, it comes down to, okay, who's your customer? What problems do they have? And then what are the unmet needs that no one else is solving for? And bringing that all together. And I think that understanding the customer is really critical. The second thing is, okay, now that you know all that, like how do you message them? How do you tell them like what products you do and what your business stands for, right? What's underpinning that is understanding who your customer is again, right? Because once you know that, you can have the right message, the right customer at the right time. And then the third thing I think that I've discovered working at and working with startups is, once you've launched, how do you find the right customer, right? And especially in today's world where VC funding is getting a little bit drier than normal, VCs are looking for startups to drive profitability, not just user growth, just for the sake of growth. So it's like, how do you find the right customers that are going to help drive your business success, profitability, sustainability, because that's what's going to get you to the next round.
Okay, so those 3 things again?
Yep, it is around solving the right problems. It's around the right message. And the third thing is around find the right customers.
Okay, so take us into a bit more detail on those. So in terms of fixing the right problem.
Yeah, when I think about like fixing the right problem, I think there's a couple of things that I want to sort of get across is, I was talking to a few of you today, right, just before this session, and one of the things that sticks out to me is like, defining what problem it is that you're really solving for, because, just because there's a problem doesn't mean that, number one, that you've defined the right problem to solve. 2, you've got to make sure that when you're working across your organization, everyone understands the definition of what problem you're solving for. Because you don't know how many times, Murray, I've worked in an organization or worked with a company where it's like, I talk to different people and say, what are you trying to achieve here? And everyone has a different answer. So I think it's critical that everyone understands like the commonality. And then the third thing is, once you've defined the problem, making sure that everyone in the organization is part of the problem solving process. And I think that that's important, because if I think about like what I do a lot is like I bring product and marketing strategies together. A lot of the times when you're trying to solve a problem, it's not just one team that owns the solution, it's multiple teams. So you've got to bring everyone together to coalesce around here's the definition of the problem, and here's how I'm going to solve it.
Okay. Let's go into more detail there as well. So that when people are kind of misunderstanding the problem or not communicating it well,
Right.
Is that a kind of how you talk about the problem that you're solving problem?
Yeah, so maybe I can double click a little bit into that to like make it more distinct and clear. So the way I'd say that the 3 takeaways around this part is a couple of things. It's number 1 is know your customers. Do you know who your customer is? What their profile is? What problems do they have? And what do you want to solve? So that's 1, right? Then you got to understand from that, what's the unmet need? Like, are there problems that aren't being solved right now? And, can you solve for them better than anyone else? That leads to the second one. Second tip is understand your competitive set, knowing who your competitors are, what they offer, what they charge, and then also, like, once you know who are they solving problems of this unmet need better than you? Because if you're trying to present a solution that someone else is already providing a solution, you're competing for the same customer. So think about that. And the third thing is, once you've identified the customer and the unmet need, understanding the size of the problem. Because you may solve a problem, but if it's not like a big enough problem, your business may not be able to scale to the point where you can achieve success. So I think those are the 3 takeaways I would take from, solving the right problems.
I can see people taking notes. I
Yep.
think you're doing well. I'm sure people are
Good.
at home as well. The third area being the kind of finding the right customers. How do you start to address that?
Yeah, I mean, finding the right customers, I think is a really interesting one because when I think about finding the right customers, it comes down to data. I'm a marketer, but I love data. I spend so much of my time in data that I think that if you're wanting to find the right customers, you need to make sure you have the right tools and the right data to be able to make these decisions and find the answers. So what I think you need to do is a couple of things. 1, start off with defining who your customer profiles are. There might be a broad set of customers, then there might be subsets, right? And then I think it's understanding what those customer profile is really critical because it will drive your data sets. You might have a data set specific to customer 1 versus customer 2 versus customer 3. So that's the first thing. I think once you've defined your customer set, you've got to step back and go, who are the most valuable customers? And by that, I mean, going back to our original conversation, Murray, around VCs and profitability and sustainability, you need to know which of your customers drive the most impact to your North Star metric. So whether or not, whatever your metric is, whether it's revenue or whatever it is, you need to understand who drives that. And then once you know that, then you can double down on that and say, okay, I'm going to go and find that customer, and this is where I typically find them, and this is how I'm going to double down my resources. Then that way you can drive sustainability, right? And then I think we touched on this, good data, good tools, making sure you have that to underpin not only your decision making, but once you've made your decision and you're testing and pivoting, that you have the data to measure the success of what you're doing. Because then it's got an iterative process where you're constantly test and learn, but data is really critical for that.
Okay. I love data.
Yeah, I love data too.
I love shortcuts for data as well. So
Yep.
Do you have tools that you like or kind of methods of analysis?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a couple of my go-to. I'm going to read through because there's quite a few tools. So I'm going to just read through some of my go-to tools. For me, when I think about customers, your relationship with customers in the first, I would say, depending on the vertical, anywhere between the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months, depending if you're B2B or B2C, is critical. So what you need to know is you need to be able to build the customer journey. So understand what the initial interactions are so that you can see the drop-off points. So the tool I use there is Miro. Miro allows me to map out the customer journey, and then I can put in what the journey looks like, what the data looks like, and then you can see where the drop-off points are. Amplitude, for me, is a go-to tool. So Amplitude allows me to, especially for those of you who are into product development, helps to connect your product, whether or not it's an app or website, to the data, so you can see different ways to measure and look at the trends. I would say Google. So I'm a huge fan of Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, Google Search Console. I see a few nods here, so everyone's familiar with that. I think that's really important, especially if you have a web-based experience.
Google Trends is cool.
Yeah, Google Trends too,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Old school.
Yeah. SEM Rush, I mean, I'm a huge believer that to drive sustainable growth, right now, you've got to drive organic. Huge in organic is SEO, because then that way you're driving organic acquisition. And for those of you who may not know, SEO is search engine optimization by acquiring customers without having to necessarily pay, but just ranking high on Google. I would say Tableau, or there's different variations of it. Tableau, Sensize is another one where you can take huge sets of data, put it in there, and then build out like the different tables, like cohort tables. And we'll double click into the cohort tables in a second. Mixed panel and App Annie if you're an app-based company. And then lastly, Adjust. The reason why I mention a lot of these marketing analytics tools like Adjust, Mixed Panel, App Annie is because for anything that I do, like sometimes I've been responsible for budgets up to $80 million. I'm accountable for like, okay, Murray, where did you spend the money? How much revenue did each of those customers generate? And then what's the value and return on investment? And that's why it's really important to, as any startup, build your attribution. And I know this is getting too technical, so hopefully I'm not getting too technical. But so you know where your marketing is being spent, what customers you're acquiring, and then connecting the two to see who the most valuable customers are.
Okay. You get all that?
It was a lot. And if there's anything that I need to double click on, please let me know, because I know I'm trying to keep it like there's a broad range of people with different understandings, so I'm open to feedback. So just shoot me a question or let me know.
Okay, we definitely will do Q&A. Normally we turn off the camera for Q&A.
Okay.
I think I'm tempted to leave it on for this one,
Okay.
but I'll leave that up to you.
Sure.
You mentioned cohort tables.
Yeah.
Tell us about them and any other kind of ways of visualizing.
Yeah, I love cohort tables. I don't know, does everyone know what a cohort table first of all is? All right, so basically in a very simplified way, just think of a cohort table as a table that represents a data set over time. So on one hand, you've got like across the top, like the different time periods. It might be weeks or months, right? And then down the bottom, it's like, it could be like, if we use an example of a customer cohort table, it could be, this customer, how does this week's acquisition perform over time? So it'll be week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. By having a cohort table, what it allows you to do is to see for a particular week, that customer, how do they interact with your product, whether or not like the trends are going up and down. And then you're able to put like cohort 1, which is week 1 acquisition, versus cohort 2, which is the second week's, and compare the two different groups to see over time how the different groups of people behave against each other. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's kind of like a visualization. If it's helpful, Murray, what we could do is send out like an example what a cohort table is.
Yes.
To
We'll put it in the LinkedIn comments.
Yeah.
So we'll put something down below.
Perfect.
So basically allowing you to see if people all started on the same date, here is the experience that they would have.
Correct. And you can segment it by customer type, by marketing channel, by stage of customer, whether or not they're like a newly acquired customer versus someone who's like an existing customer that's very healthy versus someone who's churned. You want to look at that because being able to compare week on week the different customers and how they behave, especially if you're someone who is in product, you make product changes. So you want to see how the product change has impacted a way a customer behaves. And that's why cohort tables are really good, because it gives you that comparison point.
Okay, nice. All right, any other kind of methods of looking at data that you find useful?
I would say what you should really think about is taking a step back. You need to understand your value equation. And what does a value equation means is, okay, if you were to step back and go, okay, you're accountable to this species to drive this amount of revenue, how do all the different aspects of your business drive that revenue? So is it like the number of units sold, the pricing, or whatever the case? Know your value equation, because then as you sort of build out your data sets, it should be tied to how each element drives your value equation. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm getting a few nods, so I think that's a thumbs up, but if anyone needs more explanation, I can sort of elaborate as well. And I think once you know what your value equation is and how you get to maximize your revenue or whatever your goals are, you then build the cohort tables around that. And then what I always find really useful is collectively across the organization reviewing the data together, because I think it's really important that everyone is versed on the data, they know the trends, and then they know their role in moving the value equation to get to the North Star metric.
It's hard to argue with data.
Absolutely.
So this is UTS Startups Confessions.
Yes.
So if I can, I'd like to get a confession or two out of you, maybe on behalf of people that you've worked
Okay.
with,
Yep.
without naming them maybe. But when have you seen cases of people getting it wrong with customers?
Oh, I mean, if I'm being completely transparent, I see it all the time. Even in some of the better known, won't name any of the brands, better known startups, it's because there's a couple of things. It's either like they started with a customer definition and they never evolved it. But over time, as you develop the product and you evolve it, or the service, customers are going to change, right? And also, there's a lot of other external dynamics. So you constantly got to like refine your customer profile. And what I find is, sometimes people don't understand their customers, whether it's old customer profile data or they just never started with that and they don't know who it is. And the problem that you'll face when you don't know who your customers is, you don't know how to talk to them, you don't know how to acquire them, you don't know who's the most valuable, and so it's kind of a little bit of a spitball kind of approach to things in terms of your messaging, your acquisition, which then doesn't get you the efficiency and sustainability you need.
Okay. And maybe this to start to finish on a positive note, when have you seen people get it really right as a result of advice?
I would say, like, for example, one of my most recent experiences was with a company called Moneyline. And what we did was we had really strong customer data sets. So I was able to delve into the data. I was able to work across the organisation, work with the CFO, and I was able to say, okay, here's our customers, here's how they're performing, here's the return on the investment. But hey, we wanted to make a shift in the company direction. And so by working with the data, working across the organisation, then understanding the customer, I was able to be a really critical element in terms of pivoting the business from what was a traditional consumer finance app to one that was more about embedded finance. And that was all because of the data, understanding the customers, and working across the organisation.
Okay, beautiful. I think people are getting data and collect it and use it. The last thing I'll end on is if you could go back, excuse me, and tell yourself anything when you're starting out, what would it be?
I know you probably don't want to hear it again, but it's data. Like, I really do think it's data, because data helps inform your decisions to start off with, and it helps you measure your decisions to see if you've made the right sort of pivots and iterations. And I think that it's really critical that you have that good data, because if you have good data, it can get you a long way. What I will say is sometimes bad data is just as bad as no data. So it's really critical that you do invest in that part, because it will help drive product, marketing, operations, every part of your organisation.
Okay, beautiful. I will say, for anyone watching on LinkedIn, you might be receptive to inquiries about mentoring or other kinds of support. Okay. Absolutely. Apologies to your inbox, but I think anyone would be lucky to have your time and opinions on things.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions from the audience? We'll do maybe 2 or 3 and then we'll wrap up. Yes, and excuse me for 1 second.
Thank you. So I think this question, it might be relevant to people here as well as online. I'm sure you've worked across multiple budgets. When it comes to startups that maybe are starting out with low budgets and are kind of DIY and get themselves, what would you say is one of the best ways to organically market their product or project? SEO.
I think 2 things, SEO and referrals. So when I say SEO, everyone knows it's search engine marketing, so there's a few nods there. Referrals is build a product or an experience so great that people are just going to talk about why your product is better than the next guy, and then it drives that kind of like that referral business, like the friend, what we'll call friend referral or customer referral. I think that's really good. Some of the companies I've seen grow, like for example N26, which was one of the most valuable fintechs in Europe that entered the US market that I worked at. In the early stages, most of their growth, hockey stick growth, was through customer referrals. So I think that's what you should think about is referrals and SEO are the 2 kind of organic ways to go about things.
And I love that kind of referral thing because it does scale.
It does.
Like you're not paying per customer, you have customers generating more customers.
Yeah.
If it's like truly viral.
And what I actually found through looking at the data again is customers you acquire through referrals tend to be the most sticky, most valuable. Why? Because if you think about it, if Murray came in and said, hey Murray, it's funny, we're both Murrays.
Murray and Murray, yeah.
But if Murray came to me and said, hey Murray, you should look at this product here because it's great, I'd be more likely to try it. And because he's already had a great experience, it's probably going to translate to me. And so you're going to get a better, stickier, more valuable customer. So that's why referrals are really great. And a lot of the times I look at the data, it's actually translated into real life like cases like that.
Okay, good question. Any others? Yes. This yellow for this yellow.
Right, okay. My problem in business this week is MYB changing the 2FA process. So they said that they can locate my computer. So they don't need to send an SMS with the 2FA anymore. And I wrote back to them and said I might be outside of my code of professional conduct. Right? So they're not fully understanding the customer needs whatsoever, because if a client has a legal requirement to do something and keep the data safe, and then they change their procedure, and then the data of the customer is not safe anymore, I see a big problem with that. Any commentary on that?
So sorry, I'm trying to understand, are you looking for a comment or the question, is it around, I'm trying to understand.
Well, it's around understanding the customer, so they can understand the requirements of their customer
Yep.
at all, because I could be in breach of my code of professional conduct.
Okay.
As with anybody in this business that has personal customer data, if they're
Yep.
not keeping it in the same spot,
Yes.
they would be in breach of all sorts of government requirements.
Right.
Right?
So a good example of a kind of negative referral loop there of they generate a bad experience, and now we're talking about it in front of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Sorry, MYOB. Wonderful Australian company. Maybe one more question to bring us home, anyone? Okay, we'll wrap up there. I will say, seeing you work with startups, they seem like some of the luckiest startups around the place.
Thank you.
I do recommend reaching out and having a chat. I also understand you mentor at TechStars.
I do.
TechStars is a wonderful program, so again, lucky people in that program as well. We'll wrap up there, but please join me in thanking Murray Lee.
Thank you.